My daughter-in-law's scream echoed through the living room like a dry clap of thunder, splitting in two the little air I had left in my lungs. I am Eleanor. I am 71 years old. I was a geography teacher for 4 decades, and today I discovered that to my only son's wife, I am nothing more than a piece of old, cumbersome furniture taking up too much space. I have a secret kept inside my blue suitcase, one that will change the coordinates of this house forever. I have been living with my son Robert and his wife Claire for 3 years. "So you won't be alone, Mom," he told me with that good boy face he has always had, which has served him so well to hide his lack of character. "So you can lend us a hand," she added with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The hand turned into the whole arm, then the back, and finally, the entire life. Today was one of those days that feel like 100 hours. From the moment the sun broke through the kitchen window, my feet hadn't touched the floor except to sprint from one end of the place to the other. I have 3 grandkids who are the absolute light of my life, but they pack the energy of a Category 5 hurricane. The oldest, Jake, who's 8, decided the living room was a combat zone for his plastic army men. The middle one, Lucy, 5, spiked a fever and threw up twice on the rug I had just scrubbed last week. And the baby little 10-month-old Nick is cutting teeth. He hasn't stopped wailing for a single second, crying like the pain in his gums was all the suffering in the whole world. By 5 in the afternoon, my knees were shaking. My hip ached with that sharp, stabbing pain that reminds me of the dampness of past winters. I had cooked dinner, roast chicken and potatoes, chopping the onions paper thin, exactly how Claire likes them, making sure not to burn the garlic. I had cleaned up Lucy's mess, scrubbing with vinegar and baking soda to kill the smell. I had rocked Nick, pacing that endless hallway until my arms felt cast in lead. I had helped Jake with his math homework, patiently explaining that if you have 5 apples and eat 2, you have 3 left, even though he stubbornly insisted he'd eat them all. When the wall clock hit 6:30, I was sitting on the edge of the couch, Nick finally asleep in my lap. The house wasn't perfect. There were toys on the floor because Jake outright refused to pick them up. There was a dirty plate on the table because I didn't have time to wash it before the baby started screaming again. But there was peace. Or so I thought. The key turned in the lock with violent force. Claire blew in like a gust of wind, slamming her purse down on the dining table with a sharp thud. Her brow was furrowed, carrying that deep vertical line between her eyes that shows up when traffic is brutal or her boss looks at her the wrong way. Robert trailed in behind her, head down, hauling his briefcase like it was full of rocks. "What the hell is this?" she screamed. Her voice jolted Nick awake, and he let out an immediate shriek. I tried to stand, but the dead weight of the baby and the grinding ache in my joints made me slow. "Claire, please, the baby just fell asleep," I whispered, trying to defuse the bomb before it went off. She didn't hear me. Her eyes, lined with perfect black eyeliner that hadn't smudged all day, scanned the room like a radar, looking for targets. She saw the plastic soldier under the table. She saw the crooked throw pillow. But more than anything, she saw my exhaustion, and instead of pity, it fueled her rage. "This house is filthy," she roared, pointing a manicured red finger at the floor. "I work 10 hours like a dog just to come home to a pigsty. Look at this, there's dust on the TV." Robert tried to step in, but it was such a weak, pathetic attempt, it honestly hurt to watch. "Honey, I'm sure Mom didn't have time. The kids—" "Don't give me excuses, Robert," she snapped, pivoting toward me with a fury that froze my blood. "I asked you for one thing, Eleanor. One single thing. Keep this place decent. You don't pay rent, you don't pay utilities, you eat our food. The absolute least you could do is keep it clean." Heat rushed up my neck. I don't pay rent, that's true. But my teacher's pension, which isn't a fortune but certainly isn't pocket change either, goes entirely to groceries every single month. I buy the meat, the fruit, Nick's diapers. I paid the repair guy for the washing machine last month when she overloaded it. But in her mental ledger, I'm just a burden. "Claire, the kids were very restless today. Lucy threw up and I tried to explain, keeping my voice level, using that exact tone I used in the classroom to calm down 40 teenagers. "You always have an excuse." She stepped into my personal space, reeking of expensive perfume and corporate stress. "You are so ungrateful. We put a roof over your head, and this is how you repay us? You're useless, you lazy old woman, sitting here scratching your belly all day while we kill ourselves working." The words just hung there in the air. "You're useless, you lazy old woman." I looked at my son. I waited. I waited for that crucial split-second moment where a man is supposed to raise his voice and say, "Do not speak to my mother like that." I waited for him to remember who cleaned his scraped knees when he fell off his bike, who worked double shifts to put him through college, who gave him the down payment for this exact apartment. But Robert just looked down. He started untying his shoes like the argument had nothing to do with him. His silence hurt far more than her screaming. It was a complicit, cowardly silence. The silence of a man who prefers the comfort of not fighting with his wife over the dignity of his own mother. In that exact moment, something broke inside me. Not my heart, like they say in cheap novels. It was something harder, like a rusted iron chain finally snapping. I felt a sudden, cold, absolute clarity. I gently set Nick down in his playpen, even though he was still whimpering. I stood up. My back cracked, but I forced myself to stand as tall and straight as humanly possible. I didn't say a word. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked her dead in the eyes, with an intensity that made her falter for a second. I saw her blink, completely thrown off by my lack of reaction. She expected me to apologize, to hang my head in shame like I always did. I walked right past her, not even brushing her shoulder, and headed for my room. "Don't you turn your back on me when I'm talking to you," she screamed down the hall. I closed my bedroom door and slid the lock. The noise from outside went muffled. I sat on the bed, that twin bed that used to belong to Jake, now my only sanctuary. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was adrenaline, a rush I hadn't felt in decades. I looked around that tiny room, crammed with boxes of stuff that didn't fit anywhere else. My entire life had been reduced to the bare minimum. But then my eyes locked onto the closet. Up on the top shelf, shoved behind some ratty blankets, sat my old brown leather suitcase. And inside it lay my exit strategy. I got up and pulled the suitcase down. It smelled of mothballs and closed-up spaces. I unzipped it on the bed. My fingers dug into the inner lining and pulled out a small notebook with black covers and yellowed pages. It was my old field journal, the one I used when I took my students on mountain hikes, but for the last few years, it had served a very different purpose. I opened it. Written right there were bank account numbers. Not the account Robert knows about, the one where my pension hits and is drained by the end of the month. No, the other one. The account I opened with the money from selling the big house, the one I sold after my husband passed, right before I moved in here. Robert thinks all that money got swallowed by medical bills and debt. I never corrected him. I wanted a rainy day fund. Well, the rainy day was here, and it had a first and last name, Claire Miller. I looked at the balance scribbled on the last page. It was enough. More than enough. Then I touched the folded piece of paper tucked next to the notebook. The deed to a small property on the coast in a fishing town called Cedar Key. A little house my late husband and I bought 30 years ago thinking about retirement. It had been rented out to a snowbird all this time. The tenant's lease expired last week. The house was empty. The house was mine. I started packing. Not frantic, but methodical, like a geographer preparing for an expedition. Light clothes, my blood pressure meds, my reading glasses, a photo of my grandkids that I popped out of its frame so it would take up less space. I didn't take a single thing they had ever given me. I left the gray sweater Claire bought me last Christmas, the one she only gave me because it was too big for her own mother, folded perfectly on the chair. Outside, the screaming had stopped. I could hear the clinking of silverware. They were eating dinner. Claire was probably complaining that I hadn't set the table, and Robert was probably nodding along, chewing the chicken I cooked. The sheer irony twisted my mouth into a smirk. I waited. The hours crawled by. I listened as they bathed the kids, turned off the lights, and finally went to bed. I heard Robert's snoring rumbling through the drywall. By 3 in the morning, the house was dead silent, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. I dressed in my most comfortable slacks and a pair of walking shoes. I slipped on my beige coat, the one with the deep pockets. I checked the suitcase one last time, zipping it slowly so the metal wouldn't clink. I grabbed my smartphone and opened the rideshare app. My fingers, usually clumsy with technology, moved with surgical precision. Destination? The South Side Bus Terminal. Express buses run to the coast from there every hour. I stepped out of my room at 5:50 in the morning. The living room was pitched in shadows. The streetlights bled through the window, highlighting the toys Claire hadn't picked up despite all her screaming. I walked through the kitchen. I left my set of apartment keys right on the island. Nothing else. No note, no explanation, no tearjerker letter. My absence would be the message. I opened the front door. The crisp morning air hit my face, and I felt like I was actually breathing for the first time in 3 years. The car was waiting downstairs, headlights cutting through the dark. The driver, a young guy in a baseball cap, helped me heave the suitcase into the trunk. "Morning, ma'am. Up early or out late?" he asked nicely as I settled into the back seat. I looked up at the third-floor window. Pitch black. Up there, my son and his wife were fast asleep, completely certain that when they woke up, breakfast would be hot, and the useless old woman would be ready to scrub away their miseries. They had no idea that the cook, the nanny, the maid, and the emotional punching bag had just handed in her irrevocable resignation. "Neither, young man," I answered, feeling an ancient, heavy power waking up in my chest. "I'm breaking out of prison." The driver caught my eye in the rearview mirror and grinned. He put it in drive and we pulled away down the empty avenue. As the concrete grid of the city faded behind us, I took out my black notebook and brushed my thumb over the paper. I pictured the ocean. I pictured the salt on my skin. I pictured the quiet. But mostly, I pictured the look on Claire's face when she woke up in 2 hours and realized the lazy old woman had taken more than just her clothes. She had taken away their convenience. The trip was just starting, and I, Eleanor, the retired geographer, was about to redraw the entire map of my existence. The interstate bus smelled like cheap coffee and pine cleaner, a mix that would have turned my stomach on any other day. Today, it smelled like pure freedom. I sat by the window on the shady side, watching the gray sprawl of the city shrink and vanish, swallowed up by the deep green pines lining the highway toward the coast. At 71, with my knees complaining about the humidity and my heart hammering with a force I thought I'd lost forever, I felt like a fugitive in an action movie. Only my weapon wasn't a gun. It was a gold debit card tucked safely inside my bra. I didn't close my eyes for the entire 4-hour drive. Like a true geography teacher, I studied the terrain. I watched the topography shift from suffocating urban sprawl to the open coastal plains that announce the ocean. Every mile I put between my daughter-in-law and me was a boulder lifted off my chest. I imagined the absolute chaos unfolding in that apartment right at that very second. It would be 8 in the morning. Claire would be frantically tearing the place apart looking for Jake's socks. The baby would be screaming because no one made his mashed banana with the exact consistency only I knew how to get right. And Robert. Robert would be staring at his watch, realizing he was going to be late for work, completely paralyzed by the absence of his useless mother. When I stepped off at the Cedar Key terminal, the blast of humid, salty air wrapped around me like a hug from an old friend. The town had changed a little in the 3 years I'd been held hostage by grandmother duty, but the soul of the place was exactly the same. The rumble of the golf carts, the locals selling fresh fruit by the pier, and that slow, deliberate rhythm of a town where the tide dictates the time. The very first thing I did wasn't go to the house. I went to the bank. I needed to touch reality with my own hands. I walked into the small branch across from the town square, the AC humming over pristine white tile floors. I approached the ATM with a spike of irrational panic. What if the bank went under? What if I forgot my PIN? My fingers, the same fingers that used to shake while serving Claire soup, because I was terrified of dripping on her tablecloth, now moved with absolute authority over the keypad. Check balance. The screen blinked for a second that felt like a lifetime, and there it was. The money from the big house, plus the compound interest, plus the rental income the property management company had been religiously depositing month after month. It was a serious number. I wasn't buying a yacht rich, but I was rich in options. I could pay for private nurses. I could pay for cabs. I could eat out every single day if I felt like it. I could buy Claire's arrogance and hand it back to her wrapped in a bow. I printed the receipt just for the sheer thrill of holding it. I folded it crisp and tucked it next to my black notebook. I walked out of that bank with my chin held high. A guy selling scratch-offs walked up to me. "Buy a ticket, ma'am. Change your luck," he said with a gap-toothed smile. I bought the whole book without haggling. "My luck already changed, honey. This is just for fun," I told him, dropping a tip in his hand that made his eyes bug out. I walked the 4 blocks to my house. My property is a simple build, white siding with a tin roof, boasting a wide wraparound porch where I used to sit with my husband and watch the afternoon bleed away. The paint on the picket fence was peeling, and the yard was a jungle of weeds. But it was mine. I pulled out the set of keys I'd kept guarded like a holy relic at the bottom of my bag. The lock turned smooth, no resistance, like it was welcoming me home. Inside, it smelled stale and dusty, but beneath the white sheets draped over the furniture, I recognized my past life. There was my wicker rocking chair. There was the coffee table where I graded thousands of tests. And up on the mantel of the faux fireplace sat the old wooden radio my husband restored before he passed. I dropped my suitcase on the floor and collapsed onto the covered sofa. The silence was absolute. No screaming, no TV blasting cartoons, no orders barked from the doorway. Just the distant, steady rhythm of the waves crashing against the sand. I looked down at my hands. They were raw and cracked from the cheap bleach and dish soap Claire always bought. "You're useless," she had said. The words bounced off the empty walls of my house. I stood up, driven by a rage that no longer hurt. It propelled me. I walked into the bathroom and stared into the smudged mirror. I saw an older woman, sure. Wrinkles that mapped out a lifetime of laughing and crying. Gray hair. I stopped dyeing because Claire hinted it was a waste of money. But I also saw eyes that had gotten their spark of authority back. "Eleanor," I said out loud, testing the weight of my own name inside my own house. "Welcome to your kingdom." I needed supplies. I headed back out and walked 2 blocks to Ruth's General Store. I figured she wouldn't remember me, or maybe she'd passed on, but there she was, a little older, a little more stooped, behind the wooden counter lined with penny candy jars. "Afternoon," I said. She squinted, adjusting the thick glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. "Lord have mercy," she gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. "Is that Mrs. Eleanor? I thought the earth swallowed you whole." "Almost." "Ruth." "Almost, but it spat me back out," I joked. The warmth in her voice was the most brutal contrast I'd felt in years. She didn't talk to me like I was a slow child. She didn't talk to me like I was a nuisance. She spoke to me as an equal, a respected neighbor. She asked about my health, about my kids, and I lied with terrifying ease. "They're doing great, just very busy," I said. I bought coffee, fresh bread, cheddar cheese, ham, brooms, rags, and bleach. But this time, I bought the expensive bleach, the lavender kind. I handed her a large bill and felt zero guilt. I walked back home hauling the bags. The weight felt exactly like the grocery runs I used to do for my daughter-in-law, but the difference was staggering. This food was for me. No one was going to eat the best parts of the chicken and leave me the bones. No one was going to complain the bread was too hard or too soft. I spent the afternoon cleaning. It might seem deeply ironic to run away from being a maid just to scrub another house, but the psychology of labor is a funny thing. Sweeping my floor, dusting my memories, scrubbing my countertops, it was an act of ownership. Every sweep of the broom pushed out a little more of the toxic sludge from the last 3 years. In a kitchen drawer, I found an old manual can opener, rusted but functional. I just held it for a second. It was a simple, honestly stupid object, but it was mine. It wasn't, "Grandma, hand me that." It was my can opener. By sunset, the house no longer smelled like neglect. It smelled like lavender and fresh brewed coffee. I poured myself a massive mug black, no sugar, exactly how I like it, and exactly how I could never drink it because Robert said strong coffee made the apartment stink. I grabbed the old wooden radio off the mantel, popped in the fresh batteries I bought from Ruth, and clicked it on. A local station was playing old jazz standards. I sat out on the porch in my uncovered wicker rocker, watching the sun sink into the Gulf, bruising the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. It was a geographic masterpiece. And then, only then, did I decide I was ready for Act Two. I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket. It had been on airplane mode since I walked out the door. My thumb hovered over the black screen. I knew the second I woke it up, I'd open the floodgates to the madness I'd left behind. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with salt air, and turned airplane mode off. The phone vibrated, and vibrated, and kept vibrating like it was having a seizure in the palm of my hand. 54 missed calls, 18 voicemails, 102 text messages. Most from Robert. A few from an unknown number I guessed was Claire's office line. I started reading. Not with fear, but with the clinical curiosity of a scientist watching an ant colony after kicking the anthill. Robert, 7:15 a.m. Mom, where are you? Checked your room. You're not here. Did you go to the store? Robert, 7:30 a.m. Mom, pick up. Nick is screaming and we can't find the pacifier. Claire, 7:45 a.m. from Robert's phone. Eleanor, this isn't funny. Stop hiding, we're going to be late. Robert, 8:15 a.m. Mom, for God's sake, did something happen? We are freaking out. Claire, 8:30 a.m. You are so irresponsible. You just made me miss a massive meeting. When you get back, we are having a very serious talk. I let out a dry, barking laugh that spooked a lizard off the siding. When you get back, I thought. The pure arrogance of that woman knew absolutely no bounds. She still thought this was a tantrum, a little walk around the block. It hadn't even crossed her mind that the lazy old woman had a master plan. I kept scrolling. As the day dragged on, the tone shifted from annoyance to logistical panic. Robert, 1:20 p.m. Mom, I had to leave work. We had no one to watch the kids. Claire is losing her mind. Please call us. Robert, 2 p.m. I called the hospitals. I called the cops. Mom, you're scaring me. Where are you? That one gave me a sharp twinge of guilt. Robert was weak, yes, but he was my son. I didn't want him thinking I was dead in a ditch. But then I remembered his silence last night. I remembered him untying his damn shoes while his wife humiliated me. The guilt evaporated, replaced by ice-cold resolve. They had to learn. And you learn the hard way, or in this case, through absence. The last text had come through 5 minutes ago. Robert, 6:25 p.m. Mom, we found the keys on the counter. Did you leave? Why, we have no food in the fridge for dinner. Jake is asking for you. I brought the coffee mug to my lips. It was lukewarm, but it tasted like absolute glory. No food in the fridge. Of course not. Because the magic refrigerator that restocked itself through my pension and my busted back had permanently broken down. I thought about replying, typing a simple, "I'm fine," but my thumbs froze over the keyboard. No. If I answered now, I'd give them relief. I'd give them the certainty that I was still within their reach. And true power lives in uncertainty. They needed to feel the void. They needed the house to actually get filthy, the kids to cry without a buffer, the dinner to magically not appear. They needed to live in the real world, the one I had shielded them from for 3 solid years. I set the phone face down on the table. The radio started playing a slow, brassy tune. I hummed along softly. I stood up and walked into the kitchen. I laid my black notebook flat on the clean counter. On a fresh page, I drew a vertical line right down the middle. On the left side, I wrote, "What they believe." Underneath, I listed, "Old, broke, useless, dependent." On the right side, I wrote, "The reality." Underneath, I listed, "I have a house, I have money, I have time, and I have the willpower to do this." I looked out the window at the dark street. Lightning bugs were flashing in the tall grass. Tomorrow, I'd go to the local salon. I'd chop my hair off. Maybe I'd get my nails painted the exact same scandalous red Claire wore, just to laugh at the irony. My life as an old piece of furniture was officially over. My life as a strategist had just begun. And I had a sneaking suspicion that back in the city, it was going to be a very, very long night for the perfect family. I flicked off the kitchen light, standing alone in the moonlight pouring through the glass. Tomorrow was a new day, and for the first time in a long time, the day belonged entirely to me. Suffer a little longer, I whispered into the dark, feeling a twisted, delicious sense of satisfaction. We're just getting started. The coastal sun doesn't knock. It pushes through the wooden blinds with a hot, golden authority that forces you awake, but without the violence of an alarm clock or a screaming infant. I stretched out, taking up the dead center of the mattress, feeling my bones pop. But this time it was the sound of settling, like an old house finding its foundation, not a crack of pain. It was 7 in the morning. In my past life, the one I walked out of barely 24 hours ago, I would have already changed 3 diapers, cooked 4 customized breakfasts, and been on my hands and knees sweeping toast crumbs out from under Jake's chair. Here, the only thing I had to sweep was a little sand the wind blew under the door threshold. I got up and walked barefoot to the kitchen. The cold tile felt glorious against my feet. While the coffee brewed, filling the house with that dark, heavy promise, I opened my black notebook. I had a plan. Running away wasn't enough. I had to cement my new reality. If I wanted this house to be my fortress, I needed allies, and I needed repairs. The front fence was sagging, the paint was peeling like sunburnt skin, and the yard was a literal jungle. I stepped out onto the porch with my mug. A guy was pedaling by on a cruiser bike selling pastries from a basket. I bought 2 cinnamon rolls and asked him if he knew a good handyman. "You want Mac lives down by the inlet. Man can frame a wall with one hand and sweat a pipe with the other," the baker told me, handing over the brown paper bag. That morning, walking down to the inlet to find Mac, my purse felt strangely light. No wet wipes, no backup toys, no crushed graham crackers. Just my wallet, my keys, and my phone, which kept vibrating in my pocket like a dying animal. I didn't look at it yet. No, first I had to secure the perimeter. I found Mac fixing a cast net in his front yard. He was around my age, maybe a little older, skin baked tough by the sun, hands looking like they were carved out of driftwood. "Morning," I said, putting on my teacher voice, firm but polite. "I'm told you work miracles on old houses." Mac looked me up and down, completely lacking the rushed, judgmental stare of city folks. "Miracles are the Lord's department, ma'am. I just do carpentry and plumbing. What do you need?" We negotiated. I didn't haggle his labor rate, but I was uncompromising on the materials. I wanted the house to gleam. I wanted it so that if Robert or Claire ever dared come looking for me, they wouldn't find a sad old lady's shack. They'd find a fortress of dignity. I handed him a cash advance. Watching his eyes widen as he took the bills without question was my first victory of the day. In the city, Claire audited my grocery receipts to make sure I hadn't pocketed the change from buying tortillas. Out here, I was the boss. On the way back, I passed a beachwear boutique. I stopped dead at the window. A pair of oversized tortoiseshell sunglasses with dark lenses caught my eye. I went in and tried them on. They hid the bags under my eyes. They hid my age. They made me look mysterious, untouchable. I bought them. Stepping back onto the sidewalk with them on, I felt like I had just strapped on Kevlar. When I got back to the house, the phone rang again. It was the custom ringtone I had set for my son's house. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Then I sat down in the rocker, kept my new sunglasses on, even in the shade, and picked up the device. 112 missed calls. Curiosity, that old geographer's vice of needing to know what's on the other side of the ridge, won out. I opened my messages. The tone had violently shifted. They had moved past initial anger and logistical confusion straight into the accusation and chaos phase. Claire, 9:15 a.m. Eleanor, this is ridiculous. Jake can't find his gym uniform. Where did you hide it? Answer me. Robert, 10:30 a.m. Mom, We ordered pizza last night and Nick threw it up. He's been sick since 3 a.m. Claire is hysterical. Please drop the drama and tell us where you are. I smiled with a coldness that honestly shocked me. Drama, that's what they called it. 30 years of a career, 3 years of domestic slavery, and my leaving was just drama. The gym uniform was easy. It was in the laundry basket waiting to be ironed, exactly where I left it 2 days ago. If Claire had ever lifted the lid of a hamper in her adult life, she'd know that. But she only knows how to dump dirty clothes on top of the washer, expecting the laundry fairies or her mother-in-law to handle it. But then I read a text that made me sit up straight. Claire, 11 a.m. If you don't show up by this afternoon, I'm changing the locks. Let's see how you get in to get your old rags then. There it was, the threat. The incredibly stupid assumption that I needed to crawl back, that their apartment was my entire universe. They understood absolutely nothing. They didn't know my old rags were already here, or that I couldn't care less about the stuff I left behind. I decided it was time to make my first tactical strike. Not a text back, but a hard reminder of who was actually holding up the pillars of their comfort. I opened my banking app and pulled up my recurring charges. There it was. Telecommunications, premium family plan high-speed fiber internet, the monster cable package with all the sports channels Robert watches, and the cartoon networks that babysit the kids. $200 a month bleeding out of my account, out of my pension because, Mom, you're home all day, you use it the most. My fingers tapped the glass screen with deadly precision. Cancel subscription. Are you sure? Yes. Effective date? Immediate. Next, I pulled up the grocery delivery app, the one holding my credit card hostage for their emergency midweek orders. I deleted the profile, wiped the data, changed the password. I felt a borderline childish thrill picturing the exact second the TV would drop to black right in the middle of a football game, or when Jake tried to pull up his shows and got a no-signal screen. Maybe it was petty, but it was necessary. They needed to learn that the magic show costs time and money, and the magician had permanently retired. I got up and threw together a simple lunch, rice and fresh Gulf shrimp I bought down by the docks. As I chopped the cilantro, the smell pulled me back to summers with my husband, back when life was straightforward and the future felt endless. I ate slowly, savoring every single bite, listening to the tide. At 3 in the afternoon, my phone rang again, but this time it wasn't Robert or Claire. It was Martha, my neighbor from 4B, the only real friend I had left in that concrete high-rise. I answered. Hello, Eleanor. Her voice was a tight whisper, like she was calling from a foxhole. Hi, Martha. Good to hear your voice, I replied, smooth as glass. Girl, it is a war zone over here, she gasped, dropping her voice even lower. Claire has been screaming in the hallway. She's telling everyone you stole her keys, that you've lost your mind. Robert is walking around looking like he's at a funeral, completely useless. They knocked on my door an hour ago asking if I'd seen you. I told them no, obviously. But Eleanor, are you okay? I am better than I've ever been, Martha. I'm sitting at my beach house looking at the water. I heard her exhale a massive sigh of relief. Oh, thank the Lord. You had me sick with worry. Listen, these walls are paper thin. The kids are crying non-stop. That girl Claire, she can't even boil water. Last night the smoke alarms went off because she incinerated something in the oven. The fire department had to come out. Total absolute scene. The mental image of Claire in her sharp corporate blazer and perfect manicure, dealing with smoke and firemen, was medicine for my soul. Martha, listen to me very carefully, I said, dropping the jokes. If they ask you again, you know nothing. You don't know where I am. Just tell them you saw me leave with a suitcase and I looked like a woman on a mission. That's it. Don't you worry, Eleanor. That woman hasn't spoken to me in the elevator in 5 years. I wouldn't give her the time of day. But are you coming back? I paused. I looked at the bright white walls of my house, the afternoon sun spilling in clean and unfiltered. No, Martha, that Eleanor is dead. I hung up. That call gave me the exact intel I needed. The chaos was real. It wasn't just my imagination. My absence had triggered the total collapse of their domestic ecosystem in under 36 hours. I decided it was time to deliver the kill shot. I couldn't let Claire control the narrative, walking around telling the neighbors and extended family that I was crazy or missing. I had to prove I was in full control of my faculties. I took a picture. Not some boomer selfie from a bad low angle. I propped the phone up on the window ledge, set the 10-second timer, and sat back in my rocker. I had my new sunglasses on, holding a glass of iced sweet tea with the crashing ocean framed perfectly in the background. I looked dignified. I looked calm. I looked like a boss. I pulled up Robert's text thread. I didn't type out a paragraph. I didn't offer a single excuse. I just attached the photo and typed 3 words underneath. Not useless here. The double blue check marks popped up instantly. They were looking at it. 5 seconds later, the phone started ringing. It was Robert. I watched it rattle against the table. 1, 2, 3 times. On the 4th ring, I swiped to answer. I put it on speaker, left it on the table, and kept rocking, staring out at the horizon. "Mom, oh my God." Robert's voice was pitched high, riding the razor edge of a panic attack. "Where are you? Is that Cedar Key? Did you go to the beach house? How did you even get there?" I didn't answer. I just let his anxiety bleed into the dead air. "Mom, you have to come back. This is insane. I can't find the car insurance paperwork and it expires tomorrow. The kids miss you. Nick won't stop screaming. Claire is very upset." "Upset?" I asked, my voice so chillingly calm it made his hysteria sound pathetic. I figured she'd be thrilled. She finally got her house scrubbed clean of my presence. "Don't say that." Claire's voice cut in. She had snatched the phone. She sounded breathless, and in the background, I could hear the unmistakable blare of cartoons, probably blasting from an iPad since the TV was dead. "Eleanor, this is so childish, running off without a word. We have responsibilities." "You have responsibilities. Who is going to watch the kids tomorrow?" "I have a pitch with the regional director. I cannot miss it." "That sounds like a logistical nightmare, Claire," I said, rolling the words around in my mouth like hard candy. "And I am officially retired from logistics." "You can't do this to us," she shrieked, her voice actually cracking. For the very first time, I heard real terror underneath the rage. Terror of losing her status. Terror of dropping the ball at work. Terror of actually having to be a full-time mother and a wife. "You're the grandmother. It's your duty. My duty expired the second you told me I was useless," I fired back, sharp as a knife. "If I'm useless, then I'm of no use. Watching your kids or scrubbing your floors?" "You were right, Claire. I'm an old woman, and old women need their rest." "Mom, please," Robert whined. "The cable got shut off. There's no internet. Did you do something?" "I audited my finances, son. I cut unnecessary expenses, just like you taught me." Dead silence on the other end. It clicked. In that exact fraction of a second, the penny finally dropped. They hadn't just lost their free maid, they had lost their bank. You cut off our internet?" Claire asked, utterly stunned. "With the kids here. The kids can read a book, or play with those plastic soldiers you hate seeing on the floor." "I am coming to get you," Claire threatened, her aggressive edge flaring back up. "We are driving up this weekend and bringing you back. You can't live out there alone. What if something happens to you?" I took off my sunglasses and glared at the phone like I could incinerate them through the speaker. "The house is mine, Claire. My name is on the deed. If you step 1 foot on my property without an invitation, I will call the sheriff for trespassing. And trust me, the chief out here has known me for 30 years. I heard Robert physically gasp. They had never heard me speak like this, ever. "Mom," he started. "I have company," I lied, watching Mac walk up the driveway with a toolbox. "I am busy living my life. Do not call me again just to scream at me. If you want to talk, you learn how to ask for permission." I hung up. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but it wasn't the frantic flutter of fear. It was pure, unadulterated adrenaline. I felt powerful. I felt alive. Mac walked into the yard with his tools and a heavy bag of concrete. "Afternoon, boss. We starting on that patio wall?" he asked. "Yes, Mac," I smiled, sliding the phone deep into my pocket. "We're going to build that wall, and I want it high, very high." While Mac started mixing the mortar, I checked my phone one last time. Robert had sent one final text. Robert, 4:15 p.m. Mom, the fridge is empty. We don't have formula for Nick. Can you unblock the grocery account, please? I'll pay you back. Later. I stared at the screen. I thought about my baby grandson. I thought about his big eyes. I felt a sharp physical ache, a deep maternal instinct to run and fix it. But then I heard Claire's voice echoing in my head, lazy old woman. I remembered Robert staring at his shoes. If I bought them the milk now, they would never learn how to buy the cow. I powered the phone completely off. That night I ate dinner on my freshly swept porch, watching the stars come out. In the distance, just the crickets and the breaking surf. Back in the city, I pictured Robert standing in line at a crowded supermarket, exhausted, swiping his own credit card for overpriced milk, while Claire tried to rock a screaming baby to sleep without the crutch of an iPad. School was officially in session, and I was a teacher with a hell of a lot of patience. Saturday broke with a sky so blue it physically hurt to look at, but the peace of my coastal paradise was shattered at exactly 10:30 in the morning. I was on the porch supervising Mac, who was just finishing staining the deck railing, when the strained engine of my son's SUV roared into the driveway. I didn't need binoculars to see the rolling disaster pulling in. The car, which Robert usually hand-washed every Sunday like a religious sacrament, was caked in highway dust and sporting a brand new dent on the front bumper. They climbed out looking like they had survived a shipwreck. Robert had dark purple bags under his eyes dragging down to his cheekbones, a wrinkled dress shirt, and a massive stain, coffee or baby formula on his khakis. But Claire was the main event. The Iron Lady, the corporate shark with the flawless nails, looked like she had gone a few rounds with a wood chipper and lost. Her hair was shoved into a messy bun, zero makeup, and her expensive heels were sinking awkwardly into the sandy gravel of the driveway. "Mom," Robert yelled, jogging toward the picket fence. His tone was a desperate mix of relief and accusation. I stayed planted in my rocker, dark sunglasses on, holding a glass of iced lemonade. Mac put down his brush and crossed his massive arms, casually, stepping right into the pathway between the gate and me. "Morning," I said, not moving an inch. My tone was exactly the one I used when a student walked into class 20 minutes late with no hall pass. Claire came panting up behind him. She didn't say hello. She went straight on the offensive like a cornered dog that only knows how to bite. "Open this gate right now, Eleanor," she shrieked, grabbing the wooden slats like prison bars. "The little game is over. We are going home. The kids are in the car baking in the heat. The children are welcome to come in and get a cold drink," I replied coolly. "You two are staying on that side of the fence until you remember your manners." "What is wrong with you?" Claire slammed her hand against the wood. "You're going senile. Look what you're doing, blowing money on this." She waved wildly at the repairs, the manicured lawn, the fresh paint. "That is my children's inheritance. You're squandering it." And there it was, the absolute naked truth. It wasn't love. It wasn't concern for my blood pressure. It was the sheer terror that the useless old woman was spending the nest egg they had already mentally deposited into their own accounts. I stood up slowly. I set my glass on the side table and walked down the steps to the fence. Mac respectfully stepped back, giving me the floor. I pulled off my sunglasses so they could see my eyes, pale, clear, and hard as flint. "Correction, Claire," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "This is my money. The money I earned working 40 years while you were still figuring out how to tie your shoes. And I am investing it in my own happiness, which was getting entirely too expensive to maintain under your roof." Robert tried to run interference, running a shaky hand through his messy hair. "Mom, please, it's not about the money. It's just the house is falling apart. We don't know how to run the new washer. Nick refuses to eat unless you do the airplane thing. Jake failed his math quiz yesterday because nobody sat with him. We need you." I looked at him with profound, heavy pity. "You don't need me, Robert. You need an unpaid servant, and that position has been permanently eliminated." "Stop talking crazy," Claire interrupted, yanking her phone out of her purse. I am calling the police. I'll tell them you're mentally unstable and burning through the family savings. I will get you declared incompetent, you crazy old bat. It was the absolute perfect moment to drop the bomb. I pulled my black notebook out of my apron pocket, the little book that had been my silent partner through this whole escape. Go ahead, dial, I challenged her, flipping the book open. But before they pick up, let me read you something. I have tracked every single dime I've pumped into your household over the last 3 years. Groceries, $800 a month average. Utilities, $300. Handyman repairs, because Robert doesn't own a wrench, another $200. The kids' school fees, uniforms, co-pays. I paused, letting the silence hang heavy. Nothing but the crash of the surf and Claire's ragged breathing. Grand total, Claire. I have been subsidizing your successful couple lifestyle to the tune of nearly $2,500 a month out of my pension and savings. Without me, you aren't upper middle class. You are drowning in debt. I watched the blood completely drain from Claire's face. She opened her mouth to snap back, but absolutely nothing came out. Robert dropped his chin to his chest, utterly humiliated. He knew it was true. He knew his salary and hers were entirely eaten up by the luxury car lease, the mortgage on the trendy condo, and keeping up appearances. I was the invisible financial bedrock keeping their house of cards from collapsing. Did you honestly think I was living off you? I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. You were living off me. The lazy old woman paid your internet bill just so you could ignore her in peace. But, Robert stammered, you have money. Honestly, I thought Dad's payout was gone. What's gone is my patience, son. The money is safe, and it is far, far out of your reach. Right then, the back door of the SUV popped open. Jake and Lucy scrambled out. They looked disheveled, and their clothes were stained, but their little faces lit up like fireworks the second they saw me. Grandma! They yelled in unison, sprinting toward the fence. Get back in the car, Claire barked, lunging to grab Lucy's arm, but the little girl twisted away. I want my grandma, the 5-year-old cried, pressing her face against the wooden slats. I gave Mac a nod. He understood instantly and slid the deadbolt back, pulling the gate open. I dropped to my knees and threw my arms wide. My grandkids slammed into me, nearly knocking me backward into the grass. They smelled like stale sweat and car rides, but I held them with everything I had. I felt their tiny hearts hammering against my collarbone. They were the only innocent casualties in this war. We're hungry, Grandma, Jake mumbled, looking at me with those massive eyes that were carbon copies of his father's. Mom burned the pizza, and Dad only gave us crackers. I looked up over the kids' heads at Robert and Claire. They were standing on the gravel, entirely defeated, permanently locked out of the circle of love I had built and they had trashed. Come on inside, I told the kids, but my voice shifted. The warmth vanished. It was the voice of the property owner. Mac, do me a favor and help Robert get the kids' bags out of the trunk. Just the kids' bags. What about us? Claire asked, her voice reduced to a frail whisper, all her arrogant hot air completely deflated. You're highly functional adults, aren't you? I fired back, guiding my grandkids toward the porch steps. There's a lovely bed and breakfast 3 blocks down. They take credit cards. I certainly hope yours isn't maxed out now that I'm not covering your overhead. Mom, you can't just kick us out, Robert begged, taking a half step toward the open gate. I stopped on the bottom stair and slowly turned around. I am not kicking you out, Robert. I am simply not inviting you in. This is my house. Under this roof, there is no screaming, there is no disrespect. And above all else, the old woman makes the rules. If you want to see your children, you can visit them on the porch between 2 and 5 in the afternoon. But no one sits at my dining table who calls me useless. Claire stared at me with a complicated mix of pure hatred and undeniable respect. For the first time in 3 years, she actually saw me. Not as a piece of furniture, not as a burden. She saw a woman with power, with resources, and with the ruthless willpower to use them. Let's go, Robert, she muttered, turning around stiffly, desperately trying to scrape together whatever dignity she had left. We're going to the hotel. I need a shower. But Claire, the kids. Robert hesitated, watching his children already wandering into my kitchen looking for snacks. The kids are vastly safer with me than they are with you in this state, I declared, slamming the gavel down. Go, sleep. And tomorrow, if you can manage to lower your voices and apologize like civilized human beings, I might pour you a cup of coffee. Might. Max slammed the wooden gate shut right in their faces the second he dropped the kids' duffel bags on the grass. I listened to the SUV's engine turn over and crunch away down the gravel road. I walked inside. Jake and Lucy were already tearing into the leftover cinnamon rolls from breakfast. I poured them tall glasses of cold milk I bought with my own money in my own freedom. I sat across from them, gently smoothing Lucy's tangled hair. I had won the battle, but the war for my dignity was just drawing its new borders. I looked out the kitchen window at the ocean. The waves were hammering the shoreline, totally indifferent to human drama, violent and constant. That's exactly how I felt. I had reclaimed my territory. Now I just had to teach the invaders that getting a visa to enter my country required a heavy toll, and the currency was respect. Eat slow, my sweethearts, I told them, flashing a real smile. Grandma isn't going anywhere. The morning sun on the coast isn't just light, it's a statement of intent. It pushes through the kitchen window and stretches out across the oak table like a lazy cat, highlighting the breakfast crumbs and the smiling faces of my grandchildren. It has been 3 months since I got into that taxi in the dead of night. 3 months since my daughter-in-law's "you're useless" became the rocket fuel for my resurrection. Today, the house smells like fresh-baked bread and dark roast coffee, the kind that wakes the dead. Not the industrial pine cleaner I used to scrub away my own existence in my son's apartment. Jake and Lucy are sitting cross-legged on the floor, drawing maps on giant pieces of poster board. They aren't maps of foreign countries. They're maps of Grandma's Island, which is what they've named my property. Jake is carefully plotting the exact coordinates of the big oak tree, and Lucy is filling the Gulf of Mexico with heavily smiling sharks. Watching them like this, totally calm, free from the anxiety of making a mess, free from the endless blare of the TV, confirms that my escape wasn't an act of selfishness. It was a rescue mission for me and for them. Robert and Claire pulled up an hour ago. This time there was no screaming at the fence, no threats involving the police. They rang the doorbell, they waited, and when I opened the door they were holding grocery bags, not luggage to move in. It's just a regular Sunday, but it feels like a massive diplomatic victory at the end of a long, quiet Cold War. "Morning, Mom," Robert said when he walked in, kissing my cheek with a nervous shyness I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. Claire walked in behind him. She didn't hug me. That would be asking a wolf to go vegan. But she held eye contact and gave a firm nod. "Hello, Eleanor. I brought those berries you like. And I brought my own coffee grounds. I know yours is way too dark for me." I smiled to myself. It was an olive branch. A tiny, dry little twig, but a branch nonetheless. The dynamic has violently shifted. During those first few weeks after my exodus, the chaos in their lives was absolute. Without my bank account plugging the holes in a sinking ship, they had to slam headfirst into their financial reality. The luxury SUV was surrendered back to the dealership. They broke their lease and moved into a smaller condo, one they can actually afford on their actual salaries. And most importantly, they had to figure out how to be parents. I watched them from the kitchen window while I prepped lunch. Robert was out in the yard with Mac, learning how to prune the hydrangeas. He was sweating right through his shirt, pricking his fingers on the thorns. But he didn't quit. Mac, possessing the patience of a saint, was showing him how to angle the shears. "It ain't muscle, Rob, it's leverage. The branch tells you where to cut," the old carpenter explained. Claire was sitting on the living room rug with baby Nick. There was no iPhone in her hand. She was stacking wooden blocks, talking directly to her son, making actual eye contact. She looked exhausted. Honestly, yes. Her nails weren't those lethal red acrylic talons anymore. They were clipped short, painted with a chip-resistant clear coat. The brutal weight of reality had stripped away her corporate superwoman mask, but ironically, it made her look infinitely more human. "Grandma, can I put a volcano on my map?" Jake asked, pulling me back to the present. "Absolutely, honey. Just remember volcanoes are dangerous, but deeply beautiful. Kind of like the truth. I winked at him. I served lunch out on the back deck. Fried flounder hush puppies and a crisp green salad. No customized menus, no absurd dietary requests. At my table, you eat what is served. And what is served is phenomenal, because it's cooked in peace. Halfway through the meal, Robert cleared his throat loudly. I knew the serious talk was coming. Mom, we wanted to thank you. He started pushing a hush puppy around his plate. Not just for having us over today, but, well, for everything. Claire looked up from her salad. A heavy, tense silence dropped over the table, broken only by the crashing waves and the clinking of the kids' forks. What Robert is trying to say, she cut in, her voice steady but entirely stripped of its old arrogance, is that we realized. We had to hit rock bottom to see it. When you cut us off financially, we thought you were just being cruel. We were furious, blindly furious. I know, I said smoothly, pouring myself another glass of sweet tea. But then, Claire let out a long breath, setting her fork down. Then the utility bills hit, and the laundry piled up, and the kids got sick. And we finally realized we weren't a functional family. We were a corporation that only turned a profit because of you, and you were the unpaid intern. I looked hard at my daughter-in-law. For the very first time in 3 years, I didn't see enemy combatant. I saw a woman who had been thoroughly humbled by life and actually possessed the spine to learn the lesson. I wasn't an intern, Claire. I corrected her gently. I was a safety net. And safety nets are incredibly dangerous because they make you forget that you have to learn how to walk the tightrope all by yourself. We are so sorry, Mom, Robert said, and this time his voice actually cracked. We called you useless, but the useless ones were us. I reached across the oak table and grabbed my son's hand. His palm was rough and scratched from the yard work. I loved how that felt. It's done. The past is a map we've already driven off the edge of, son. All that matters is the road ahead. And the road ahead was bright. Not flawless, but bright. After lunch, we laid down the new rules of engagement, or as I like to call it, the Treaty of the Coast. They come out 2 weekends a month. They do not come here to be waited on. They come here to coexist. Robert is in charge of the grill and the yard work. Claire is in charge of the dishes and organizing the kids' beach activities. I am the grandmother, just the grandmother. My only job is to spoil them, tell tall tales, and watch the sunset. My money remains strictly mine. I decided to invest a chunk of it into the local elementary school. I bought them new laptops, library books, and obviously brand new atlases. 3 afternoons a week, I run a geography tutoring program for the local kids. They call me Ms. L. When I walk down the sandy streets of town, people tip their hats to me. I am nobody's old woman. I am a pillar of my own damn community. Later that afternoon, as Robert and Claire were packing up the car, because they now know they cannot stay overnight without an engraved invitation, I sat in my rocker. Claire walked up the steps, hesitating for a second. Eleanor, she said softly, thank you for not giving us the money for Nick's formula that first day. I looked at her genuinely surprised. Why on earth would you thank me for that? It was a brutal thing to do. Because Robert had to drive down to the pawn shop and sell his gaming console that same afternoon to buy the milk, she said, a faint, proud smile pulling at the corner of her mouth. It was the very first time I ever saw him sacrifice something he loved for this family, without me having to scream at him to do it. I think that was the exact day he actually became a father. I nodded, a deep satisfaction warming my chest. My master plan had worked far better than I ever calculated. I hadn't just liberated myself, I had forced them to liberate themselves from their own pathetic immaturity. Drive safe on the highway, I told them. And Claire, next time you come, bring that lemon pound cake you claim you make so well. I want to try it. Her eyes lit up. It was a direct challenge, but it was also a real invitation. I will, and I promise you, you're going to love it. I watched them buckle the kids into the back of the car, which was no longer a massive luxury tank, but a modest used 4-door sedan. Jake and Lucy waved frantically through the rolled-down windows. "Bye, Grandma! Guard the map!" Jake yelled. As the car disappeared around the bend in the road, the quiet settled back over my porch. But it wasn't an empty, lonely quiet. It was a silence vibrating with absolute possibility. Mac walked out from around the side of the house, wiping grease off his hands with a shop rag. "They left, Happy Boss," he noted, leaning against the wooden post. "They left better Mac. And that is a very different thing." I stood up and walked down to the water's edge. The sun was starting its descent, painting the sky in those violent purples and bruised oranges that only exist on the coast. My bare feet sank into the warm, wet sand. I closed my eyes and took a massive drag of air. It smelled like salt, like freedom, and like pure dignity. I thought about the Eleanor from 3 months ago, that hunched-over, aching woman scrubbing plates while silently weeping into the sink. I wanted to reach back through time, grab her by the shoulders and say, "Hold the line, woman. Have a little patience. The lioness inside you is just taking a nap." I have discovered that getting old is not the end of the road. It is not some dark, dusty corner where you sit and wait for the reaper. It is the summit of the mountain, and from up here, the view is spectacular. I am 71 years old. My knees pop like dry twigs when it rains, and I need thick glasses to read the fine print. But I am the undisputed owner of my time, my space, and my destiny. I have learned the hard way that respect is not requested. It is enforced through action. That love does not equal servitude, and that sometimes the absolute greatest act of love you can show your children is to let them fall flat on their faces so they can figure out how to stand back up. I pulled my black notebook out of my pocket, my silent confidant, my ledger of emotional warfare. I flipped to the very last page, the blank one. I clicked my pen and wrote a single sentence. Something to never forget. Something to read every single morning with my black coffee. Never apologize for taking up space in this world. I stared out at the massive, endless, unstoppable ocean. A wave slammed violently against the jetty, throwing white foam into the air. I am that rock. I have weathered the hurricanes, I have taken the beatings, and I am still standing right here. A little more polished, definitely harder, but absolutely immovable. The sea breeze whipped through my hair, that silver hair I refused to dye, because I earned every single gray strand like a combat medal. I smiled. Tomorrow, I have class with the local kids. We're covering the continents. I'm going to teach them that the world is massive, breathtakingly huge, and that absolutely nobody has the right to tell you your place is in a dark, quiet corner. The lazy old woman has a hell of a lot of work left to do, and God, am I going to enjoy every second of it. I turned my back to the water and walked up to my house, my castle, where the only reigning queen is me, and where happiness is no longer a gift I wait for someone else to hand me, but a crop I harvest with my own 2 hands. Life begins many times as you have the guts to hit the reset button. And mine, my real life, has just begun.